bad.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, of course, Ricardo Randes, also known as Ricky Randes, and a great episode for you today. Today we have an amazing episode. Two past guests that I'm super excited about combining for this amazing conversation. Dr. Jessica Rose, who's been on the show a few times and also been on the Union of the Unwanted with Dr. Robert Malone, and a returning guest who hasn't been on in quite a bit. It was October 2019, episode 201 of the Ripple Effect Podcast. Dr. Tom Cowan, who is a author, he's a podcaster, he's just all around a super interesting guy. This show's going to blow your mind. I mean, his opinions, perspectives, whatever you want to call it, his view on the world is so fascinating. And he's written some super fascinating books that really make you rethink everything you thought you knew. And remember, you'll be able to find this show and all my shows on my website, rickyvrandes.com or the rippleeffectpodcast.com. So if any of my shows get censored, that's the one spot, they're always available. You can also find it on many video platforms like Rockfin, Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble, Minds, and all audio platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. So subscribe to me wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please support the show if you can. This is a value for value show. So if you can support the show, please do financially. If you can't support the show financially, no big deal. Share the show, review the show, do all that stuff. And it goes a long way in helping people be exposed to the Ripple Effect Podcast. And also check out my other show, The Union of the Unwanted, which is a show I host with Sam Tripoli, Charlie Robinson, and Midnight Mike. It's a great roundtable discussion with researchers and content creators, thinkers, doctors, so many interesting people. So check that out. It's also available on Odyssey and Rockfin and anywhere you can listen to audio podcasts. I think the last thing I want to share is on my website, you can go to support and you'll find all the ways you can support the show: Rockfin, Patreon, crypto, purchase some merch. That's it. Enjoy the conversation. I'll talk to you on the next one. Peace.
Good. How are you?
Good. You hear us well?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Awesome.
Hi, Tom.
So this is my good friend, Dr. Jessica Rose, who she's going to co-host with me. She's I've kind of introduced her to some of your work, and she finds it very fascinating, like most of us do. So because she's has some expertise in some of the things we're going to be talking about, I figured she'd be a great addition to this conversation, and maybe can ask some better questions than somebody like myself who's not an expert at anything. So I figured I'd have her join us. And I believe you guys are both cat lovers, so that's also something else you guys have in common. Jessica's will probably appear on the screen at some point during the conversation. But thank you, Dr. Cowan, for being with us. I really appreciate it. Last time you were on the show, I think it was a year ago or maybe longer. But at that time, I don't think people were nearly as interested in your opinions of viruses as they are now since 2020. But for people who are listening who might have not heard that past episode, could you get into maybe just your opinion on terrain theory? Because that's something you're hearing a lot of, and you're hearing a lot of people kind of mention it, kind of exploring this idea. But I'd love to hear, in your own words, your explanation of what terrain theory is and kind of some of your theories on that specific topic.
So I don't really talk much about terrain theory, just because it's too vague a concept for me. So I would rather just talk very specifically And I would also point out, by the way, that I don't have a theory here. I have a explanation of the facts, and that's different. The germ theory is a theory that certain microorganisms cause disease. The viral theory that these particles get into your cells and replicate and then reproduce themselves and then bud off, that's a theory. If you look at the facts, you don't see any such thing. And so I don't actually like what I'm saying to be called, what's my theory? I don't have a theory. I have an explanation of how, it really boils down to a very simple question. How does a virologist or a scientist know there's the existence of a virus and then show that it causes disease? If you can answer that question, you understand the whole COVID situation. If you can't answer that question, and when I say answer it, I mean you should know how it should be done and then how it is done. And the problem is, I have not met any lay people or any medical doctors who actually know how to answer that question. I know how virologists answer that question, but they're not talking because they don't want to answer that question. And so I think if you want, the best use of our time is to get your listeners to understand how to answer that question. Because once you do that, you understand the whole show.
Well, luckily we have a virologist with us. Jessica knows a bit about it. Let's get into that answer. Is there anything you would like to add, Jessica, to that?
I'm all thinking about hearts. I don't know. We can talk about this too if that's interesting. But I'm kind of obsessed by this this heart organ lately. But yeah, we can talk about this.
Talk about heart if you want. It's your show, so you should decide what you want to talk about.
What would interest you? Like what's tickling your research nerves lately, Tom? Are you into something more than other things lately?
So if I look back on my life, especially, I mean, even as my young life, they used to call me Doubting Thomas when I was young. And I grew up around a lot of medical doctors, and I didn't like a lot of what they thought or did. And what I realized in looking back is that my task in life, if you want to call it that, especially in terms of science and especially in terms of medicine, is to take what we commonly believe is true and see if that's correct. Mm-hmm. Now, I think one way to do that is to give you a very specific example of what I'm talking about, which has nothing to do particularly with viruses or heart or anything. And I think you'll see exactly what I mean by that. So that, if you want to know because that's what I like to do, is push the envelope. So I wrote a book, The Heart Doesn't Pump the Blood. I wrote a book, Genes Don't Have Anything to Do with Cancer. Cancer is not a genetic disease. I wrote a book about vaccines are neither safe nor effective. Then I wrote a book that viruses don't cause disease. In fact, they don't really even exist in the conception that we think. But let's look at the next one. And if I can ask you guys a series of questions, it might be more fun.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's talk about the human being, right? And let's ask a simple question. What is a human being made of?
Are you asking us?
Yeah.
Uh, Well, there's a bunch of water. There's a bunch of proteins and carbohydrates. There's energy. What are we made of? Yeah, it's a good.
By the way, can I screen share, because it might help?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if you attempt to, it'll probably just ask me for permission, and then I'll give you permission.
Yeah, let me push this.
What are we made of, Ricky? What do you think?
Yeah, Ricky, what are we made of?
Energy is definitely, I think, one of the answers. I'm not sure. I'd see. I always suck at pop quizzes, but it seems like I'm not sure if it would be one thing, right? I mean, I would probably give a combination of answers like Jessica did.
All right, let me clue you in then to how I see the world, because that may be the most interesting. So here, and because I'm talking about a way of knowledge. Now, I could be wrong, right? You know, it's just my way. But here's my answer to that question. A human being is made of a head and eyes and ears and nose and mouth and a chest and limbs, hands, feet, toenails. Most of us have hair, nose, things like that. Now, the reason I say that is because if you ask me, how do I know that? Not to say and either of your answers were incorrect, but they're very complicated, and whether they're factual or not would take us a lot to get there, right? Mm-hmm. But I think you probably both would agree with what I just said. If you don't, let me know. Right? Head, ears. Now, here's another thing. Every scientific medical system in the history of the world, Chinese, Ayurvedic, Native American, they've all agreed with what I just said. So we're on pretty solid ground. And these are what I call observations, things that human beings all perceive directly. Now let's go deeper. What's underneath, say, the chest? And my answer would be, well, we have a heart and the lungs, and in the abdomen we have liver and spleen and kidneys and all that things. Generally speaking, we call them organs. And there are many different organs. You could even call the muscles an organ and the blood an organ. And again, the question should be, how do I know that? The answer is, I've been in surgery and I've seen people cut open. And even though they had some chemicals, so that changed things, right? They were asleep. But it didn't change things to the point where you can still see in a living person, liver and kidneys, et cetera. And not only that, you can use pretty simple scanning techniques like ultrasounds and MRIs and CT scans. Those aren't simple, but you can see those organs in intact living beings. Not only that, every medical system that's ever been has agreed with the fact that there are organs. In fact, like the Chinese system, they believed that these organs were everything. In fact, if you were sick, it's because the energy flow through your liver was too much or too little or whatever it was. The kidney qi was low or the spleen meridian was weak or whatever. Same with Ayurvedic, same with Native American. Everybody agreed there's organs. So again, I think we're on safe ground. And I would also submit, anytime you get into a dispute with somebody, it's good to go through this process. What do we agree on? And then you get to a point, maybe you won't agree. But right now, I think everybody is with me. Now let's take it, one of those organs, like a liver. Now, what is the liver made of? I'll throw this back to both of you.
Cells.
Cells, right? Ricky, any different answer?
No, cells though.
All right. So let me ask you, Jessica, have you ever seen a liver cell in an intact living person?
I have to say no.
You think anybody has?
Mm, I would find that highly doubtful.
I think clearly the answer is no. The only way you can see a liver cell, and again, I'm not necessarily saying it's there or it isn't there, but I just want to be clear how we know things. So the only way you can see it is to take it out of a living person or a liver or a dead person, take it, remove it, and then stain it, which means poison it with heavy metals, and then shine an intense light at it, and you will see these compartments called cells. Now, that doesn't mean they're there or they're not there, because we know that when you remove something from a living system, that changes it. For instance, bacteria make spores. Now, you could say, well, do the spores really exist? I mean, obviously, yes, but only when they're threatened. And interestingly, no other medical system has ever thought there were cells in living tissue. In fact, the guy who came up with the idea that there were cells was a guy. So it was a theory called the cellular theory. His name was Rudolf Virchow. And to much derision, he said, all living things are made of cells because I can see them in onions. And so therefore, if onions have compartments, we must too, even though to a certain extent, it makes no sense. Like, why would a liver break itself up into little cubicles? Wouldn't it be much stronger and have much better communication if it was just what we now call a syncytium, which is just organized water with proteins and fats and minerals and amino acids in it? And in fact, if you actually run the numbers, there's considered 188 different organs or tissues in a human being. And exactly 44 of them are now considered syncytium, which means they have no cells. Like the lens of your eye has no cells. It's just a homogeneous, organized, crystalline water structure. So we know at least, a quarter of the tissues are not cellular at all. And the others we can only see once we remove them, kill them, poison them, and stain them. And so I think one has to doubt whether that actually exists, except as a microscopic artifact. So that's the first thing. Now, if there are no cells, then that's a real problem for cellular pathology, which is the basis of modern medicine. But let's go even deeper than that. And let me just say, I didn't just say there are no cells. I said in 144, we think there are, at least conventional wisdom. And 44, we think there aren't. We know there aren't. But let's
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So let's assume that the compartmentalization by cells is not really a thing. So how do we respond to or answer questions about red blood cells? What are they then?
Red blood cells are oxygen delivery devices, which if you make, what is the definition of a cell? The red blood cells don't meet that definition.
Right.
So they're not a cell.
So we're
that
talking
doesn't mean there aren't little bodies floating around.
Right.
There are white blood cells and there's red blood cells. Now, white blood cells are a little more complicated, but a red blood cell has no nucleus, has no DNA. That is not a cell. That is a misnomer, pure and simple.
Out of this this definition already. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's not a cell.
Right. So
and that's the only one you can see in a live blood.
Right.
And now it could be that you can't see it because it's a technical problem, right? We don't have the microscopic power to see in a living tissue. But every time we do look with whatever microscopic power we have, all we see are what are called syncytium, which is organized crystalline water. That's it.
But these are multi-nucleated, like, do we still have nuclei, or are we?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
So okay, let's say there are cells, or there at least, so let's take a tissue or an organ where we think there are cells. So like a liver, you can see hepatocytes, and then you look at them, and then you say, so what is inside that? What is a cell made of? And if I could screen share, I would show you the modern depiction of a cell, which is a drawing.
You should be able to screen share.
Oh, maybe I can.
Or I can draw a picture.
Let me see if I can get it. Here it is. There. Do you see that?
Awesome. Yeah, I do see that.
Okay. So here is the modern.
Mine.
Here's the modern depiction of a cell. It has all these things in it. Now, let me just say, the first thing about this is you can't see any of these except with an electron microscope. Now, again, Ricky, I'm going to ask you a question. If I said to you, I want to know what your hand does and what it's made of, right? Now, here's how I'm going to do it. First, I'm going to cut your hand off your body. Then I'm going to put it in an enzyme bath to dissolve all the tissue. And then I'm going to macerate it in a blender. And then I'm going to freeze it to 150 degrees centigrade. And then I'm going to stain it with heavy metals. And then I'm going to put it under an electron beam that evaporates immediately all the water. And then I'm going to look at it and see, and I'm going to tell you what your hand is made of and what it does. What do you think of that?
I think it'd be impossible to know what my hand's made out of because you just messed up my hand, or at least changed what it is, right? And
exactly. Yeah. Right. That's common sense. So in order to find any of these structures, that's what you had to do, all those steps. Now, let's look at one of those important, what are called organelles or subcellular components, which is called a ribosome. Mm-hmm. The reason a ribosome is important is because that's where RNA is made into protein. So if you're going to inject people with RNA in order to make it into protein, you better have a ribosome, which is the site where the RNA is made into protein. Now, if you look at this, and I can guarantee you, every published picture of a ribosome is a perfect sphere like this or like this black one. Every one. And I know the exact history of the discovery of ribosomes. They're considered to be lining the endoplasmic reticulum, which is this structure here. And every one is a perfect circle. Now, here's the next question for you. If this is a perfect circle on a two-dimensional picture, it must have been what in real life?
A burger.
A sphere, right?
Yeah, a burger. They always look like burgers in the diagrams that I've seen.
You know, it looks a perfect sphere. So it had to be a circle. So it has to be a sphere. Now, next question. What are the chances if you took an orange and cut it up in a blender and then dehydrated it at 150 degrees centigrade and then shot an electron beam at it and evaporated all the water, that every picture of it would be a perfect circle?
Probably not, right?
The answer, I know the exact answer, which is 0%.
You know what I love about this, not to interrupt, but this reminds me, this is why I was so fascinated with your work the first time you came on a year or two ago. And because it's so important to have people like you who are willing to just ask these questions. So often we just accept things as fact and we just continue accepting it. And then, but Jessica, last time Jessica was on my show, me and Dr. Rose were talking about some of the books that she learn from it and going to the university and all these things, and how you just kind of accept that as the foundation of your knowledge and understanding of the world, and how you never question those things. It kind of reminds me of Rat Park, which we discussed actually last time me and Jessica talked. And I'm sure you're familiar with the study about how they fed the mice, I don't know if it was cocaine or whatever, in the water. It kept coming back to the water, eventually died. And they're like, oh, look, this substance is addictive. And then finally somebody actually from Canada, I think it was a scientist, who's like, well, we're not taking consideration the cage has become a part of the experiment. So they created Rat Park, did the same experiment where the mice could run around and mate and do all these things. And then it didn't keep coming to the water. And that's kind of similar, if you kind of get what I'm saying, in regards to the way you're looking at things. It's like you're adding these things and then you're pretending it doesn't affect the outcome. And
exactly.
Yeah.
That is exactly where I was trying to get you to go. Because if you say that freezing and dehydrating and enzyme baths and killing and putting it under an electron beam, as we say, does not affect the final appearance or function, you are a lunatic. That is not science. That is superstition. And so the reality is, and if you want to look into this more, the best biologist who ever lived was named Harold Hillman, and I've read about 4,000 pages of his work. And he proved without a doubt that a ribosome doesn't exist in real life. This is an artifact of the way that we process cells. And this thing could only be a gas bubble. And that's why it stains with heavy metals. In which case, there is no place where the RNA is made into proteins, in which case the whole theory of genetics falls apart. Now let's look at another one. This is the endoplasmic reticulum. And here we have a problem because I'll get to this in a minute. There is a nucleus. You can see that. I'll show you that in a minute. And you can measure the difference between the nucleus here and the cytoplasm here. And it has a different pH. And the only reason something has a different pH is because the hydrogen ions, which are the smallest thing there is in nature, that's what we're told, can't equilibrate across the barrier. You with me? In other words, there's a different concentration of hydrogen ions here than here, which means there must be some sort of membrane in between. So here's the problem that biologists have. We're told that the DNA has, or the nucleus has the DNA, which makes RNA in the nucleus, and that controls everything about us. But the problem is, how does the RNA get out of the nucleus without letting the hydrogen ions in? That's like you need a door, because the RNA is approximately 100,000 times bigger than a hydrogen ion. So that's like you make a door, and the door is meant to let elephants in and out, but it's also supposed to keep mosquitoes out. That's a real problem. So they invented a thing called an endoplasmic reticulum, which is a tube which has an opening so that the RNA can go out of the tube and go along the pathway to the ribosomes to get translated, and that's how it works. But here's the problem. A, the ribosomes don't exist, and B, you can see the nucleus doing 360s in the cytoplasm. In other words, it circles around like this. You can see that in a living tissue or a living cell. And every endoplasmic reticulum supposedly is connected here and to the cell membrane. In other words, it's like a rope from the nucleus to the cell membrane, and there's like 20 of them. And I would love for either one of you to explain how, if you have 20 ropes tethering this to this, it circles around in 360. Because I don't see it. And the reality is the endoplasmic reticulum doesn't exist. There is no way for the RNA to get out of the nucleus. which means it can't possibly be made in the nucleus. And therefore, the whole theory of genetics, DNA in the nucleus, hereditary material, makes RNA translated in the ribosomes into proteins, which is what we're made of, fundamentally, is proteins. It's all just a myth, because they don't even exist, those things. Now, the next question is, what is a cell made of? And here you can actually see a kind of cell. So now I'm thinking, okay, there are cells. And here's all there is you can see. You have a membrane, right? Very thin membrane. You have organized water. You have a nucleus. And you have little dots that are called mitochondria. And that's it. You have some proteins, amino acids, genetic material, fats dissolved in the gel, the organized, coherent water, and that's all there is. And anybody who says there's more in there than that has to prove it, and has to prove that the technique that you're using to show it doesn't change the outcome. And if you read 4,000 pages of Hillman, you will be convinced that all those things don't exist. Synapses between nerves don't exist. The whole theory of nerve transmission is bogus. And lots of other structures which we say exist, but only are found with electron microscopy, are simply staining artifacts. Now, here's where it gets interesting for people. If none of those things exist, how do we make proteins? Because we're made of proteins which organize our water. And I would contend that the whole COVID thing is about whoever controls what proteins you make controls you. Because they're trying to control the proteins that you make by putting RNA in there under the theory that RNA is translated in the imaginary ribosomes into proteins. And maybe there is something about that, but it doesn't work like that. And so they're having trouble making that happen. But the question remains, so if it doesn't work like that, how does it work, right? Now, you guys with me?
I'm writing down questions.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. So again, the contention is we are made of proteins. Living things are made of proteins. You know, my pencil is made of lead or graphite or something, and my light is made of different things. Living things are made of proteins, cell membrane, organized water, nucleus. Now, here's another problem. We say in genetics that every sequence of DNA, called a gene, makes one protein, right? That's called the genetic dogma. But then we did the Human Genome Project, found about 200,000 proteins and 20,000 genes, and whoops, there's 180,000 proteins that are not made by genes. So where are they made? How are they made? This is the fundamental aspect of what a living being is made of. And we don't have a clue because there's no code for 80% of the proteins. Now, here's where I have a theory. This is not something I can prove, but what I can prove is that the DNA acts like an antenna, and it collects impulses like from light and sound and thoughts and feelings and electromagnetic fields and waves, and it turns them into something called DNA water, which is little bits of highly structured water which can diffuse out of the nucleus and get made into proteins without any code otherwise in the cytoplasm. And that is how we're made. No code. the energy of life. So you guys talked about energy, the DNA, which is not a double helix, by the way. The water is a double helix, not the DNA. No chemical has any shape like a double helix. The water collects the energy with the help of DNA, turns that into the stuff that we're made out of life. Now, why do I think that? Let me show you this picture here. So this is a friend of mine, and she works with water, and she takes water and puts it in a petri dish, and then asks it questions or shows it images, puts it in the freezer for 7 minutes, and then photographs the image that the water makes. Now, here, the water, which is the intelligent part of this system, is not making proteins, right? There's no amino acids, there's no way to make proteins. All it can do is make shapes out of crystals, because that's all there is just water. So this image was made with her showing the water a wedding invitation. And she said, show me the wedding invitation. Puts the water in the freezer, and 7 minutes later, approximately, the water makes this. It's a wedding ring. Now, you could say, well, why didn't it sing, "Here Comes the Bride"? Because the water doesn't have a voice box. Can't sing "Here Comes the Bride." Why didn't it march down the aisle? Because the water doesn't have legs. All it has, it's the ability to form crystals. So it did. Now, here I'll ask you a question. If you were water or an intelligent being, and I asked you the question, what is falling down? What would you make?
What is falling down?
Yeah, she asked the water the question, what's falling down?
What would the water make itself look like?
Yeah, water has an answer. It's going to show you what's falling down. Everybody knows the answer.
Then I'm an idiot because I'm confused.
I'm thinking a waterfall.
Yeah, maybe a waterfall, or maybe the rain or something, right? But here's the answer the water gave.
London Bridge.
Everybody knows London Bridge is falling down, right? We learned that when we were 3.
So you're saying that she is asking the water a question, putting it in some fridge or freezer to make it cold and crystallize, and these are the images she's coming up.
Yes, absolutely. There's a whole book. Now, what that tells you, yeah, let me get out of this for a minute. What that tells you is water has the ability to essentially have a memory and think abstractly, and to solve very complex questions using whatever medium it has to create things that most of us don't have, including me for sure, don't have the intelligence to figure that out, especially in 7 minutes. And so the importance of this is, you know, every religious and spiritual tradition has said, we are made out of water. Every healing system has been essentially, you know, the reason we have fevers is we have organized, you know, crystalline water, and we put some poison in it, and we have to get rid of it. So we heat up the body, dissolve the gel, let the water flow out. We call that mucus. Unfortunately, we call that a disease because the doctors don't understand. They think that we're made of something else, which we're not. But if you understand the reality that a swollen joint is basically the organization, the coherence of the water has deteriorated for a whole variety of reasons, And now you have liquid water instead of organized water. And we call that a joint effusion. If you water hardens in the lens of your eye, instead of being transparent to light, now the light can't get through because you have a tangled web of disordered crystals, and we call that a cataract. But unfortunately, because we don't know what the system is, unlike what the Bible said, which was basically in the beginning was the light, that's the wave, and then came the water, and then comes the human being in all living forms. Exactly. That's exactly what you see if you do proper biology. Doesn't mean they were, I'm not saying because it's in the Bible it's true, but it turns out the Vedic tradition, the Quran says the same thing. And you see that theme of organized water, healing spas, healing water in every medical tradition there is. Everyone used fever therapy to melt the water. You can see every disease. I have slides that show that cancer, the organization of the water has changed from a crystal into liquid bulk. It's like a puddle. And a puddle can't do anything because it's disorganized and stupid. And so it can't make the proteins, and you can't live. And so essentially what I've been looking for these 40 years is what is real and what isn't real. What is an artifact? What is only because you see it in dead and dying tissue? It's not really there. And then once you understand what you see, you can understand every disease process as just an application of that. And then you understand that what's happening now is some people with certain ideas are trying to take over the proteins that we make by injecting people with codes that they think, or at least hope, will make proteins. Once you control somebody's proteins, they're yours. And
Jessica,
frankly, I don't want anybody controlling my proteins. I'd rather that be between my water and the energy of the world, because that's what I think works the best.
yeah, that energy thing is something that's not discussed enough. And I mean, you can, in some cases, quantify it. I mean, I had Rupert Sheldrake on some years ago,
Right.
he has some really interesting theories and just experiments and studies that really can't be explained with modern science and our understanding of the world. But like I always say, the placebo effect is a perfect example of something that we can't explain, and yet we understand it. It exists. It happens. It has a actual effect on people, and yet many other things that we can't explain. We call pseudoscience, or we say, because it doesn't fit into these guidelines, it must be untrue. Jessica, I know you're writing down some questions. Do you want to share some of those? Or do you have anything you want to add to what Dr. Cowan was just discussing?
Well, I'm processing, but I just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I guess.
That's
the ribosome. Okay, the ribosome thing is something that absolutely fascinates me. My last postdoc was in protein biology, so I was actually studying ABC transporters, specifically the B12 importer of bacteria. Anyway, as part of my work, I did some X-ray crystallography work. And so my question, I guess, is the X-ray crystal structures of ribosomes that are in the PDB bank, what are they? Like, it's not that I'm not saying that you're not absolutely
right. Artifacts of putting in toxic energy into a living system.
But are they some other protein with some other function?
Yeah, they're proteins, amino acid, minerals crystallizing around water to form certain images.
So where, like, that fascinates the hell out of me because,
Because what you should read Hillman. If you haven't
Okay.
read Hillman, you won't understand this whole thing, because
Okay.
he's the only one who went into this thinking, I don't believe a word of it. I'll believe it when I can prove it.
Right.
So he figured out what the energy of an X-ray crystallography picture would do. And then he would take something like a protein solution.
He did this?
What?
He did this?
Yes,
Like,
and he would form
wow.
the same structure as what you call a ribosome. And he'd say, see, you didn't account for the fact that you can get this lipid bilayer membrane, which doesn't exist, by putting a protein, heavy metal stain, dissolve the protein, and you'll get a lipid, you'll get a bilayer. That's just simple geometry. And he's the only one who did all those experiments.
Wow.
One
Okay,
by
I have
one.
to read that.
And so he can tell you what you'll see on an X-ray crystallography. He even sometimes down to the level of which protein you need to put into the bath at what temperature to get it to show a thing that looks like a ribosome. And
But
the thing is, if nobody thinks like that, they won't do that, because it's like he said, and Stefan Lanka, who has the same technique with virology, what we forgot is the first rule of science is do everything you can to prove yourself wrong.
Wrong, yeah.
If you don't do that, did anything I do, including my thoughts, including the environment of the situation, Rupert Sheldrake doesn't have a theory. He has very clear observations of how things work. And so, we are accustomed to saying, if it isn't physical, it doesn't exist, right? That's what we learn in medical school. So I ask you both, did you marry or find your spouse because they had 12 more carbon atoms than the next man or woman?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Mine is 12 years younger. Does that count?
It doesn't, because younger, we are quality sensing devices. Quality is not physical. We love this person and not that person, not because of their hydrogen ions or their sulfur atoms or their proteins or their DNA, but because they're kind or loving or honest or something, none of which can be measured or quantified. And that's how we do life. Yet, we are told in medicine that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's
It's a
wild.
lie. It's nonsense.
Yeah, it is very interesting. that whole absence of things that are pretty much everyday obvious.
Yeah, I had a heart surgeon who said, "Oh, it's all bullshit. The only thing that exists is stuff you can see and feel." So I asked him if he loved his wife. He said, yes. I said, with all your heart? And he said, yes. I said, you've dissected a lot of hearts. Did you ever find something called love in there? And here's the reason I say that is because he is confused, right? He says one thing, and then the next minute he contradicts himself and says, the only reason I'm in this marriage is I love her with all my heart, even though he just said love doesn't exist because it is nowhere in anybody's heart that I've ever seen.
It's in the right ventricle.
Yeah, it's in the right ventricle.
So we're talking about hearts. How great is this? So can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna add that I remember just real quick. I remember, and I can't find a study, but I remember reading something about, you guys might be aware of it, birth control having a effect on women and who they're attracted to. That there's, I'm gonna have to find it before I go into. I'll find it before the end of the discussion, maybe screen share. But there was something about how there was, I don't know if there was aromas, a certain energy that women it would attract them to better spouses, people who would make better husbands or boyfriends or whatever. And then there's some studies that birth control is actually having a effect on their ability to do so. It was a little weird, but it's kind of similar to what we were talking about, how there is something that we're not even aware of exists having an effect on your, your choices and I guess who you're attracted to. But yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
I watched this amazing video of the title, I can't remember. It was about the structure of the heart. And forgive me, I never write down names of people, but it was this gorgeous demonstration of the like literal unraveling of the heart.
Yeah,
And how
Francisco Torrent Guas.
Yeah, exactly. So I fell in love with this video. They compared this to like blind buttresses in cathedrals, Gothic architecture. They called it the Gothic heart. It was just beautiful. And so it really explained a lot for me about how the heart works, because I'm not a cardiologist, but I'm fascinated with this myocarditis issue with these having, being a side effect of these injections, and I'm writing papers about this. So I really want to know more about what the heart is and how it works, and what the myocardium is and how it works, and why is it myocarditis and not endocarditis and not pericarditis and da 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 da. So yeah, I found this absolutely fascinating, that you have this like mechanical motion, which is basically like a squirt gun, those things where you pump the water in and you go, like that's what the heart is. It's not a pump per se. It's like this.
It's not a pump at all.
Injection and suction, and it's like this.
So the person who knows the most about this in the world, because Torrent Guas has died, and his main student was a guy named Manel Ballister, and I did a podcast interview with him. And he's written a number of papers extending Francisco Torrent Guas theory, or not theory, but finding. And we're actually doing a conference on the new medicine on October 9th and 10th. It's an online event. Andy Kaufman and I, and people who are really like Stefan Lenka and Manel Ballister will be there, and Gerald Pollack, and
oh wow, I know him.
Yeah, so he's going to be talking about exactly this, and how the whole EKG cycle is wrong, and our whole conception is way off. And he was a very prominent cardiologist. He was chosen in Spain to head their cardiac transplantation center. So, and then he met Torrent Guas and changed his whole view of it. Now does polarity therapy. So he has understood that from understanding the anatomy of the heart, and then going from there and understanding the function, which is not at all like what we learned, then you come to a completely different understanding, which is very similar. The new biology is we're made of basically water that's organized, that's the intelligent part of the system. We have a downloading device like a radio. The radio is a receiver, and it accepts wavelengths from the outside, which, some people say, well, I can't see these wavelengths, so they don't exist. Right, so you can't see the radio waves, so they don't exist. And, and the radio converts that wavelengths into sound, and we convert wavelengths into the living human being through the proteins. And it's very similar. And that's the other thing with COVID, is they're putting graphene into the injections, which is an alternative receiver. So they're now messing with protein synthesis and your ability to receive wavelengths. Now you're gonna receive the wavelengths that they want you to receive.
Do you know anyone who's done any mass spec on a sample of one of the mRNA products?
Who's done what?
Mass spectrometry.
Yes.
Like, you do?
I do, absolutely.
Can you talk about that?
I mean, there's a guy named Robert Young who's done that a lot. There's this group in Spain, La Quinta something or other. They've looked and they find graphene oxide and other oxides and other nanoparticles in every single one of the new injections. And the research on the use of these and how they interfere with protein synthesis and wave transmission goes back decades. This is not new.
No.
This is wild. I'll tell you, I mean, just rethinking so many different things, it just makes you kind of reanalyze everything. And in regards to when we talk about energy, and just the possibility of how we can affect one another, we talk about, oh, there's people that have positive energy and it seems to be contagious, and negative energy is this related to water, because we are made up of water and water's everywhere? Do you think it's water impacting water in different people in different places?
Yes, through something called bioresonance.
Bioresonance.
Every living organism does it. It's obvious. You put 20-year-old women in the room in a cabin, they all menstruate at the same time. Human beings, plants, animals communicate. They communicate through bioresonance because the water is it's like a radio. It collects signals. The DNA molecule helps with that. It transforms that into other forms of bioresonance, which then gets sent out into the world. Very similar. It's like I was driving in a car with a 3-year-old friend of mine, and some interview of me came on, and he said, "Dr. Tom, how'd you get in that radio?" Well, I didn't get in the radio. The radio is a device for accepting wavelengths, right, of a certain frequency and converting that into, music or talking. That's what we are. And you can see that if you understand what we're made of, which is not ribosomes and endoplasmic, that's make-believe. It's just water and spirals, just like the snake, every religious tradition has said we're made of a double helix. The double helix is in the water. It's not the DNA. And by the way, if you ever read, I don't know if you've ever read the original paper by Watson and Crick proving the DNA was the double helix.
Looked at it.
It was in Nature 1953.
I must have read that.
Like most science, you read it and you think, these guys they just made it up. Because the angles weren't right and the base pairs weren't right. They were approximate, and then they got the Nobel Prize, and then you have to believe it. And if you don't believe it,
how can we have generated this whole thing with such specificity? Like, why the nucleotides, like the G and the C and the T and the A? Like, why? What is all that? Is this still a thing? But it's not the thing that we're thinking that it is.
So if you think about it, here's the big. So they say, the DNA is formed into a double helix, right? Everybody knows that.
Well, that's what they say, yeah. But I've never seen that.
You've never seen it. Nobody has ever seen it.
I really want to, but I haven't. No.
Now think about it. If you take any pure substance, right, chemical,
okay,
what's the form? Like sand.
Oh.
There is no form. What you could say, well, Tom, I'm wrong. I have these glasses. They're just made of substance. They have a form. There's only two ways you can get form. One is mixing it with water.
Right.
Two, you put intention into the system. In other words, your glasses, which are made of substance, only have that form because somebody shaped them into that form. No substance has any form unless that's how you make a sandcastle. Sand has no form, it's pure substance. You make a sandcastle by A, mixing it with water, B, you put intention in it with a bucket or whatever, and you make it into a castle. Without those two, there's no form. There's no substance that has any form. Any protein, chemicals that make up a protein without water, no form. DNA, the base pairs, nucleotides, no form. You mix it with water, and the intention is the tricky part, because that comes from God or somewhere. That's the creative energy of the universe. Using water, it collects these chemicals, and water, I can prove it to you, and not right this second because I don't have my device, will form a double helix. The double helix then spins off little pieces, and those form the proteins.
Okay, I have a question now again. I've also become fascinated with vortices. I have an applied math degree, and I almost did fluid dynamics, but I don't know enough about it. So I was reading up on it a little bit, partially because of this heart research I was doing, and I became fascinated with the formation of some kind of a vortex, which must be happening at some point for the suction component of the heart.
Right. Leonardo da Vinci proved that the heart converts the blood into a vortex back 500 years ago.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
And it's now been proven with MRIs that you can see that both the right and the left ventricle create a vortex, and then
Right.
inside the big vortex there's little vortices.
Right.
This is not a theory. This is how water behaves when it's making a creative impulse.
And does the vortex in itself like structure water?
Yes. Makes it coherent. And you can prove that because the bond angles of the molecules change when under a vortex.
To 104.2?
What?
Are you talking about the bond angles of the oxygens?
The hydrogens and oxygens.
Sorry. Right.
They go like this or like this. Bulk water has a certain bond angle. Ice has another one.
Right.
Coherent water has a totally different one. So it's a fourth phase, even though normal science says there is no fourth phase. They're wrong about everything.
So what's the point of this? Like, I was talking about this with my partner today. Like, if there is some kind, if there is, or let's assume there is collusion, like, and you know, so many realities of science, let's call it, are being hidden. Why? Like, wouldn't life be better if we kind of just were as we are? Do you know what I mean? Like, wouldn't it be better if we utilized like the concept of free energy? This is what my partner is studying now. So I read this little thing that he wrote, and if we could, for example, harness the power and or the concept of free energy from, I don't know.
There's more energy in a drop of water than in a power plant.
So technically we could harness that.
Absolutely. It's been done.
And so why the rejection of this reality as it was?
I mean, that's the question that everybody wants to know, which is, what's the problem here? And there's three possible answers that I can give. One is the people who are running the show are stupid and they don't know these things, right? They just like the doctors, they don't know these things. They're just ignorant. That's one possible answer. Second possible answer, they're evil. They know, but they have certain reasons why they don't want you to know. We can, I'm sure all three of us make up reasons why people wouldn't want that to happen, you know, money and power and blah, blah, blah. They might even think it's good for you because if the world runs better if they're in charge. They might even think, well, you know, humans have to come to this out of their own impulse, not have it freely given to them. So that this is a game of elevating our consciousness. So you have to earn it. If you want to be free human being, you can't have this given to you. So they may be evil, but have a certain sort of, this is the way it should be kind of thing. They're trying to wake us up. After all, you know, the devil is actually supposedly a fallen angel. So that's reason number two. And reason number three is they're cowards. They have a job and they don't want to lose their job, and somebody will put them in prison. And besides, it's gotten way out of hand. And so they don't want to say anything because it's better the way that it is now. You know, like when I was in residency, I saw a 2-month-old baby killed by a vaccine. So we lied to the parents and they all went on and I quit. Why did they do that? I don't know, because they had debts, they had, you know, medical school, they wanted whatever. I don't know, but that I would call cowardly. So it's either ignorant, evil, or coward. Now, when people ask me that, in which of those three, I say, I don't know, get Fauci on the phone, I'll ask him which of those three it is.
Well, I would say that number three would prevent that from happening. Ha ha.
And I don't know, because I don't want to ascribe anybody motives, just like I don't want anybody to ascribe me motives. I don't know why they do it.
Well, you like we talked about before, me and Jessica and I, the last time we talked about this. I mean, once you accept something as being true, it's and your whole field of work or your whole worldview revolves around that being true. It's really hard to convince somebody otherwise. I mean, it's like that quote I say it all the time on the show. It's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked, and that's the case, I think, in some situations where it's like, well, we've gone so far in believing this. It's like, how do we rewrite everything, and how do we, you know, now go back and say everybody's wrong and it's so. I think sometimes that's a motivator. I know when we had Dr. Robert Malone on my show, and then I think I invited you on, but you couldn't make it when I had him on the other show I host, the Union of the Unwanted. You know, he discussed how he loves science and all these things, and then all the patent wars, right? Like everybody wanted to get involved in the patent and wanted to get the credit, and all these scientists who wanted to, you know, just all this ego that got in the way. And I think that's a part too of the puzzle, is that there is ego. And then, you know, there could be some of hidden knowledge, right? I mean, you look at the Freemasons, people talk about how they possibly have some knowledge, some wisdom that they don't share with the public, that, you know, that has gone on throughout the generations. So who knows? I think all these things could be true. And but I think a big part is, like, anytime somebody goes against the grain, and the mainstream usually pushes back, and then it kind of, you don't get a lot of Toms who are willing to be outspoken and say, hey, I know this goes against everything you believe, and I know this goes against everything you were taught, but this is the truth. This is what I believe to be true, and this is my information and my perspective. Most people will just be like, no, that why would I want to be that outcast, or why would I want to be looked at as an outcast? I'll just go along with the mainstream narrative, which is why people like Tom Collins is so important to kind of push back and make us rethink things and not just accept things for being true.
Well, Mark Twain said, it's not what you don't know that gets you, it's what you know for sure that just ain't true.
Yeah.
Well, this goes into also, I know you've talked a lot about 5G and some of these other things. I mean, with this understanding of water and how important it is to our understanding of the world and what affects us and doesn't affect us, that really does put more emphasis on the dangers of these these frequencies, Wi-Fi, 5G, all these things that could obviously be having a effect on what information the water is downloading, I guess, for a lack of a better term.
All we are is water downloading wavelengths. And if you put in the same harmful pulsed high intensity frequency, you're going to degrade your water and you're going to have trouble.
I think I don't know if it was when you're on my show, on another show, you were talking about putting water in a plant next to a child monitor, right? And the effects of that. Is that what do you remember?
I don't know that study, but they've done a lot of studies with the coherent structure of water with exposed to all kinds of frequency. I mean, it changes whether you put Bach or heavy metal music. It changes whether you have the intention as a gratitude versus hatred. It changes, and everybody understands that, because we understand that your experience, which is your reality, is different depending on the energetic field that you're exposed to. Every human being has that experience, except doctors, apparently. They think it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Which is totally unscientific and irrational.
Yeah.
It just is, because we all have the experience that that's how life is. That it's called bioresonance. We are in a sea of, thoughts and wavelengths and frequencies, and the Earth's, Schumann resonance, and every animal will seek out these healing resonances. Well, not the modern ones, but the usual animals. Humans have forgotten, but we used to know, and now we have to figure it out for ourselves. So apparently that's the game we're playing. I actually have to get going here, guys. So.
Yeah. And Jessica's actually calling in from Israel, so I know it's super late there too. Jessica, do you have any final questions? Anything that you want to before we let Dr. Cowan go?
Well, I'll just leave this here. If we ever get together again, which would be nice, I'd love to talk about monoatomic gold.
About what?
Monoatomic gold.
Oh, right. Okay.
Next time.
Next time.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. You mentioned you're meeting up with Gerald Pollack and some other people for a conference. How can I watch that or find out?
It's called the True Healing Conference, and we also have a short webinar this weekend. But truehealingconference.com. You can also go to drtomcowan.com. And basically, we've tried to collect the people in the world who know the most about this, things like cymetics. So they're studying the effect of sound on water. And the woman with the pictures of London Bridge will be, and Kelly Brogan and Andy Kaufman and Stefan Lenka, who won the court case and proved that viruses don't exist. And Dolph Santiga, who talks about the coherence of water and orgone energy, and all the people who are really at the forefront of, we didn't get this right, we need a new biology here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and if there's any links you want me to put in the show description, I'll do that. Send me those, and I'll make sure to put them. Thank you so much, Dr. Cowan, for your time, for pushing back against the grain and making us rethink the world as we know it, and for all your hard work. Hopefully, we discuss some of these topics that Jessica was touching on next time we all get together.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
What an interesting fellow, huh?
Wow. Yeah, I think he needs to talk to my partner. What he just mentioned, orgone energy, and that's what he's all about. He's. Have you ever heard of etherometry?
I've heard the term, but I don't know what it is.
Okay, so yeah, you can talk to him one day. It's something like that I found out about through him when I first met him, and it's like it's the study of the ether and the fact that like basically everything we've come to know about like physics, chemistry, and anything having to do with both of those subjects is wrong, or not wrong, but incomplete. And apparently this ometry kind of fills in the blanks of the incompleteness. But yeah, I don't know enough about it to explain it better than that. It has something to do with latent heat, something called latent heat. It has something to do with anyway, yeah, one day you can talk to him and he'll explain it all.
It's fascinating because like Dr. Cowan has said, a lot of things are almost assumptions, right? Like they observe something and then you assume because this is there, it must mean that's there, or because this happened, it must mean that, it's because of this. And a lot of what we think is when we say science, like we think, okay, it's factual, it's a fact. Oh, this is a fact. We know for sure somebody's tested it, somebody's proven it. And one thing that I've always found fascinating about philosophy, and we've talked about this before, last time we chatted, that there's just endless questions with answers that are constantly being debated. Well, I always looked at science kind of the same way. I'm like, how can there be any facts in science? Like there's temporary facts, like, well, this is what we think right now, but there should be no absolutes ever. And we're so limited to our senses and our five senses, and we're so limited to the way we look at things and what we're taught, how that influences how we see the world. That I mean, I just assume there's way more that we just don't understand, and way more because I remember once, this was years ago, I had this she's the host of Talk Nerdy, which is a podcast, and it's a pretty popular podcast. And she her name's Cara Santa Maria, and I remember we're talking about how, like, oh, do you think that like 20 years from now, maybe 100 years from now, or maybe 1,000 years from now, we'll look back at our time like we were cavemen and we had very little understanding of the world, the same way we look back at the primitive age and say, hey, look, they didn't understand the world. Their grasp of reality was so flawed. And she was like almost a quick answer and an absolute certainty that she was like, no, we have a very good understanding of the world and this and that, and it was like, wait, like what you're saying right now sounds so unscientific. This idea that you're so sure that like you're close to the finish line now, like, and when I say finish line, I mean, if figuring out the world is a journey, that you think that right now in this moment in time that we're closer to that finish line of really discovering how the world really works. And it's like, that's kind of arrogant, and it's kind of naive, to the fact that, like, I'm sure many people thought that their theory, whatever it may be, was going to be the last theory, in that topic or subject, and it was never going to be debunked or disproven or modified because they figured it out. So having people like Dr. Cowan who really just throw just complete curveballs to the way people look at the world. I mean, just him talking about water, and like, think about how insignificant we think water is.
Oh yeah,
I mean, we just don't even really. Well, yeah,
that's not me.
you know, and
I worship water. I have this weird relationship to water. That's why it's like it's absolutely impossible for me. And this is a wild thing that I'm about to say. It's impossible for me to just write off what you just said. Like the whole thing, the ribosomes not existing, the water being, in charge of protein creation. I mean, to let's just say my former PI would laugh all the way to the bank, I think, on the suggestion. Because, we're protein biologists. This stuff is all real. We can see it. Look, X-ray crystal structure. But the experiences I have in the water, like just today, I swam twice. I just get compelled. It's like when the water looks or smells or feels a certain way, I just have to be in it. And I found this one, I posted it on Facebook, you should look at it. I was going for this image that I had in that I could see with my eyes. Like there was this little pocket of water that was lapping up over the rocks that looked very, very crystalline. Like, and I knew I know that it's different somehow, but like how the hell would I know that? Like what, by looking at it? Okay, sure, it looks different, so it must be different. I don't know. But I wanted to capture this image with my camera and I managed to, and it looks very much like glacial water. It has that sparkly, icy, like kind of smooth. I don't know how to like describe it, but it's different somehow. And I'm sure that it's different because it's being thrown up on rocks continuously. Like it's becoming oxygenated or something. I don't know. There's something different about it. Maybe it's becoming structured because the vortices are created when it's sucking from the shore. Maybe I'm looking at structured water. I don't know. But these experiences I have with the water, it's, I mean, it's as close to a religious experience as I can have. I mean, this is my church, man. Like I worship this stuff. I have no idea what it is. It's wild. Everything about it is magical. I don't know how else to feel about it. And the day before yesterday, or the day yesterday, sorry, it was just as magical, but for different reasons. It was totally glassy and kind of like swelly, and it was, surfable, and I did. But it was just the combination of that and the silence, and I don't know. I'm getting a little bit like mystical now, but yeah, you're right though, okay? Because I go through these religious experiences in the water, and I'm looking around at people and they're completely like, bleh. Like they don't see it, they don't feel it, they are not having the experience that I'm having at all. They don't even understand what I mean when I say, like, okay, this happened to me the other day. This isn't an analogy. It's like, this is what happened the other day. I had to get out of the water when I was surfing, having a great session, because the water was distracting me so much because it was too beautiful. Like it was so clear and you could see right through it. And I describe it to the other surfers as I feel like it's so clear, you're like seeing through time. And I told a couple of them I had to get out because I was too distracted by the beauty, and they look at me like I'm freaking crazy. And yeah, you're right. Nobody really gets the water thing.
Makes sense. Well, isn't that what people used to say about ghosts, right? They're like, oh, you have to believe in it to be able to see them, right? And
right, yeah.
And it doesn't, you can look at that in numerous different ways. You can look at it as like, that means if you're believing in it, aren't you possibly a victim of your own imagination? You're creating it. But you can also look at it from the perspective of maybe the opposite's happening. Because you don't believe in it, you're not noticing, or you're overlooking something that's amazing that's right there. And, and you're not seeing the beauty. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating. I mean, I'm a explorer of ideas, and I love, I mean, I'm I always say I'm an idiot. I'm like, what do I know? But I love these people who are just pushing against the grain and asking these questions. And because I am an idiot and I don't claim to know anything, I'm willing to have, discussions with just about anybody, regardless how ridiculous the idea might seem at first. If it's somebody like Dr. Cowans, who is obviously knows his shit, he's very intelligent, he can explain it in a way that's easily digestible, then I love things like that.
It's incredible too, because he comes from this very authentic, like the dinosaur textbook background that all academics and most doctors come from. But he's just a person asking questions, which is what everyone should be doing, especially if you're in the field of knowledge accumulation, which doctors should be. He really makes me interested, which is good, and pausing, which usually means I have to go look something up, which is good. He has some really, really, really wildly challenging ideas, and I haven't gone too deep into his work, but the stuff that I have read has completely, like, I can't refute it. He's solid. The way that he approaches the topic, whatever it is, like whether it be the blood pumping the heart, or rather than the other way around. I mean, it's founded. He's a cardiologist, right? That's what he. Yeah. So you're right. He knows his shit, and he has this really solid foundation. So I mean, if you were going to I'm not an expert in any field. I know a little bit about a lot of things, but if you put him up against like my old PI, like a hardcore 40 years in protein biology, it would be a very interesting match. But he's also an open-minded guy, so I'd be really interested to know what the resolution would be between say those two figures, because I can't imagine. It would be really cool to see that.
Yeah, I wonder how many, either him or do you know who Dr. Kaufman is? Another. Yeah. I wonder if we could find a good debate that maybe they've done in the past with somebody who is trying to debate their theories, because they are. I mean, it is one of those things where it's just I hate to compare it, but it's kind of like Flat Earth. When I did the Flat Earth podcast on the Union of the Unwanted, they made really good points. And your first response when you even hear about this theory is that it's ridiculous. Like, it goes against everything that I thought I knew. And you initially resist accepting any of it, or even entertaining any of it, which is really something that we have to constantly catch ourselves, and make sure we stop ourselves from doing those things, from just immediately having a opinion that gets in the way of exploring new opinions and ideas. Because I think a lot of times it's like, okay, well, this is where I stand, this is what I think. And then if somebody says something that goes completely against that, or completely turns what I think upside down, your ego, I don't know if it's ego or if it's maybe just the concern about being wrong, you just immediately want to debunk what they're saying and say, no, you're wrong. That can't be right. Instead of just saying, oh, wow, this is really interesting, I've never looked at things from that perspective, let me explore this. And that's usually what I try to do. But I think typically people don't do that. People, if you say something that goes against everybody's views, I mean, especially with things that people are very emotional and passionate about, vaccines has been one of those discussions throughout the years.
For some weird reason.
Well, I think
why is everyone so defensive of vaccines all of a sudden? Do you even know what it is?
Well,
no. It's so weird. But just to comment on that flat Earth thing, do you ever wonder, maybe those people are tapping into the potential reality of the simulation theory? If this is a simulation and we're in a virtual reality right now, then the construct would kind of be you know, I always imagine it's going to be like some kind of flat domed thing, like, and you know, there would be edges, which makes me wonder about stuff, but whatever. So maybe they're like tapping into the flat or the edge of the of the construct of the virtual reality world, and that's why they're convinced that it's flat. It's like that's the thing that gets me. It's like, where does that come from and why are people passionate about it? That's the more fascinating question. Like, there's no point in saying you're wrong, because how do you know they're wrong? Have you been outside in a space shuttle and seen, you know, this curvature thing? I haven't. I've seen photos and that's pretty convincing, but like, you know, I would never be so arrogant as to say you're wrong. There isn't flat. Even if I think it is, you know, that it's, you know, it's like maybe there's another explanation which people haven't thought about. So
And, so, and
I can hear like my partner laughing at me from the.
if you haven't checked out the Flat Earth episode of the Union of
I haven't, but I will.
check it out, 'cause they make some. I mean, their explanations to why they believe or think what they think.
Have they ever said that? Like, what are they? I'm interested.
Yeah, well, that we did a whole, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours, just them explaining and even showing like pictures of like, okay, look at this and look at that, and this is the explanation. I'll send you the link to the episode. It's quite fascinating because it's kind of like the Doctor. Well, they do kind of believe that it is kind of like flat.
That fits my simulation theory that we're in this dome. Like, why not, right?
Well, you look at a video game, right? Like when you've created only so much land, or so much of the level that you're in, it stops somewhere, right? If you go far,
it has to, because it's a construct, and I know people who make video games, and that is how it's done.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I have a guy in New Zealand who I'm friends with who has a virtual reality room, so I need to ask him some questions. Yeah, there he is.
Well, have you you know what you need to do? You need to. Do you have a website where you could where people can connect with you or anything? What's the best way of connecting with you?
Yeah, I have that I do not consent website, which has my it has my information.
Oh, it does. Okay, great. Yeah, because I've gotten a lot of people who really enjoyed our conversations. They're like, you guys are so honest when you're together and you have this chemistry. I'm like, yeah, it's when you meet somebody who is honest and willing to kind of self-reflect and kind of analyze things together, it makes for a really interesting journey.
I've gotten those comments on my YouTube videos for the Bears updates too. It's so cute. They're like, get back on with Ricky again soon. I'm like, aw, that's so nice. Thanks.
But yeah, and maybe what I'll do is next time we do get together, we'll maybe try to schedule something on a weekend or a day we can do it a little earlier, so you don't have to be up so late, because you are a trooper for being up so late. And this is nothing compared to the Union of Unwanted. We had a 7 o'clock start time here in the East Coast, and it was like midnight or whatever it was over there. So
yeah,
but we'll definitely.
I have another one in 8 hours too. So.
Oh really? Then get some.
Well, yeah, I will. It's no, it's fun. So it's, you know, if things aren't stressful, then it's like I don't know. I feel like there's no loss. You know, you catch up on sleep eventually. I had a really good nap today too.
That helps.
Actually, yeah, I did have kind of a run-in with some COVIDity, I think, and so I doubled up on the vitamin D and the C and my echinacea, and I slept more. So I was like, okay, this is a good excuse to like decompress, don't do any work for 2 days, just rest and watch some movies.
That's so important. It's
oh my God.
That's why I'm like hoping sometime in the near future I could do this full time, because some of the stresses of like my full-time job like gets in the way of these conversations so often, because I don't feel like I'm myself. I feel like I have all these things that like this weight on my shoulders that I can't remove and just really be focused and engaged in the conversation, because I, once the show's over, I'm stressing about this and I have this to think about and to think about. So, that's the goal. I know people like the show. Unfortunately, people don't donate to podcasts as much as they probably should. I always joke around about how like the same percentage of people who die of COVID is the same percentage of people who listen to the show who donate. It's the same number. It's so it, but either way, I know a lot of people are in.
We gotta get that up to vaccine stats.
That's
Cha-cha-cha.
but yeah, we'll keep in touch. I'll email you this once it's up and live, but I'll also email you maybe some possible dates and times where we can get together sometime in the near future and satisfy all those people who've been asking us to talk again. So but thank you so much for staying up and joining me with this discussion. You definitely I think you definitely added to it, and it definitely wouldn't have been.
Oh, I hope so. I hope he had a good time. That's always my concern because
I know I'm the same way. I'm always like,
yeah. Do you think he had a good time? I do.
You're such a generous lover. You're just always worried about.
No, really. I think he got excited a little bit. He was happy to show some slides.
It's
so yeah.
Because after every show, like I'm always like, that's the thing that concerns me the most. I'm like, I don't care if like it's a episode that the listeners necessarily thinks the most interesting or not interesting. I'm like, if the guest enjoys themselves and and it's a fun discussion, like I know the listeners will like it. So I'm always concerned, like, okay, did they enjoy themselves? Like, did they have fun? Were they able to kind of get loose a little bit and share some interesting perspectives and philosophies and stuff? So it's yeah, I'm just.
I think that happened for sure. Like, and it's a good way to put it, like to get loose. It's like I think like that's why people like us, because it's really, we go really quick to like loose.
Yeah.
It's like nothing to hide here, man. Like
yeah. And it's amazing that you can, it's hard to do sometimes with certain guests. It's amazing that it happens as often as it does on the show, because typically when I'm with my friends, like that's one of the reasons why I'm always like, let's get a bottle of wine. Let's have a drink. Let's get alcohol in people's systems quickly, not to get them drunk, but just because I like when people are as loose and as silly and as open as I am, and people have more fun when they're like that. So to be able to try to capture that in a podcast sometimes can be difficult based on like who you're just talking to, because sometimes that's the concern. It's like, well, am I gonna have some chemistry with this guy? Is this guy gonna not like me, or is this person not gonna like me? And knock on wood, 350 something episodes later, I can only count on one hand. Like, I think the guests that I'm like, probably not going to invite them back on,
that's great. Wow.
So, but thank you, Jessica. We'll keep in touch. Have a great night, and we'll talk again, I'm sure.
Yes, we will.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye. Thanks for having me on with this one.
Hey, thanks for joining me. It was real fun. You definitely asked way more interesting questions than I would have. I probably would have dumbed it down a little bit. So I like the fact that we had somebody here who could get into things a little deeper and in more detail. So that's why I was hoping. I'm like, I hope she's interested, because it seemed like something that you might be intrigued with. So I'm glad that you also got exposed to just a different way of looking at one of the things you love the most, water. So that's fascinating too. So. Thanks, Jessica. Have a great night. We'll talk again.
You too.
Bye.
Can't wait to see this one.